Hello and welcome to the Watering Hole. Thanks for checking out this clip. Don't forget to like and subscribe because that'll make the baby Jesus cry, and I know how much you guys love making the baby Jesus cry. Okay, so first article that we're going to cover today comes to us from The Conversation. It's very long, and I'm not actually going to read the whole thing, but it's an interesting topic that comes up in my household quite frequently, so I thought we'd give it a little talk about.
Okay.
So, the curious joy of being wrong. Intellectual humility means being open to new information and willy.
And willy?
I think it's just got too long.
I think it's
of
like it's willing for something.
willingness to. Yeah, no. I use Pocket to like kind of make everything look the same, so that when I crop it or whatever, I don't have to redo it for every stream. Someone redeemed a hydrate, and now Van Briggs is saying, "Gotta water the flower dick."
The flower dick does need it. How's it going, Senshini?
Yeah.
Also, real quick on my end, I didn't catch these when they happened because the stream was starting and all their stuff. Clueless Expert, Myrick Rand, Loki the Tired Trickster, Jump Point. Thank you all for resubscribing. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I think the subtitle for this was just too long for Pocket's programming or whatever.
So long it's out of pocket.
Willing to change your mind is the full thing. So yeah, this is basically the whole article is about how it's the conversation. So some guy telling his personal story of like this how this sort of thing affected his life, and he talks about how he grew up conservative evangelical Christian, and when his brother died young, that caused him to have a crisis of faith, which in therapy he worked through a bunch of stuff, and part of that was like coming to grips with the fact that he was wrong about some things.
Okay.
He doesn't specify, like he doesn't say that like, oh, I deconverted from Christianity or I left the evangelical movement or anything, like, so he doesn't explicitly say anything like that, but that is kind of the vibe that you get from reading it. But one of the things that they bring up that comes up in my house quite frequently, though, is so I've got 5 kids. They argue with each other constantly. And oftentimes the crux of the argument is just a misunderstanding where somebody thinks one thing but is wrong about it, but are unwilling to acknowledge that they are wrong about it. Hi, you okay? Work stuff? Okay. Yeah, so they're unwilling to acknowledge that they were wrong about it. And more than once, I have stopped the kids and been like, hey, you know what? I love being wrong. You know why? It's when I find out that I was wrong about something, that means I learned a new thing, and learning is fucking awesome.
Yeah, I remember being a kid and thinking that if my opinions never changed, that was a good thing, because it meant that I had always had the right opinions all along.
Yeah, but Cyrus, you and I were both raised creationists, so we know that that's baked into that whole thing.
I know that, but I was also too young to link those things together.
Mm-hmm.
Like that concept didn't track for me. So like now that I'm an adult, when I am wrong about something, it makes me happy. And on top of that, I still have to war with that part of me that wants to defend my being right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But knowing that that's a stupid part of me that needs to shut up.
A regular part of my research process is I have to kind of pay attention to how I'm reacting to the results of my searches. Like when I'm searching on, like, whether it be like Google Scholar or just regular Google or whatever, if I see something that, like, a headline that doesn't agree with what I thought was going to be the conclusion, and it's from a source that I would consider to be at least somewhat reputable, my gut reaction is, okay, well, I'm just going to scroll past that one and look for the one that I do like. And I've had to actively fight against that part of myself. And it's a good thing too, because they're like, there are things that I've said in previous videos that I later found out were wrong. And probably my favorite instance of that is there's when creationists talk about the about junk DNA, one of the things that one of my go-tos was that there was a study that like found through applying mathematics of some kind that's beyond me, is that given humanity's mutation rate, like how quickly we mutate, and given how long it takes for purifying selection to get rid of harmful mutations, our genome cannot be more than 15% functional. Like 85% of it has to be completely without function. And that was the conclusion of the paper. And it was like, it was great for my purposes and it worked really well. It was easy to explain. And it says exactly what we need to.
That junk DNA doesn't technically exist?
Yeah, it depends what you mean by junk DNA. There certainly are parts of the genome that are entirely functionless. But it also depends on how you're defining function, because biology is tricky and stuff like this actually makes a huge difference. But no, the thing that overturned that, the thing that I like about this is that like there was another study that came out that pointed out, like, oh no, this is actually not the case. It turns out the math is a little bit off, and if you take this into account, then it's actually fine, and you can have up to like 90% functional genome and everything is fine. And when I first read that, my gut reaction was like, oh man, if like this is saying that it could be like 90% functional, that's just going to play right into the creationist hands. That's not the answer that I want. But then a part of the story is that one of the peer reviewers for the paper that overturned the original paper that I like to use was the lead author of the original paper. And the feedback that he gave was some of the, like, it was essentially the highest praise that you can get in the form of feedback. It was like he recommended publication without change, and he was super excited to be proven wrong, because it's new. Like, I learned a new thing. Now I am.
It's new information that you didn't have before. I know for mine, there's actually my recent I'm wrong about a thing has nothing to do with anything so grandiose, and it's going to make my entire audience and you especially just kind of cringe for a moment. Turns out I was wrong about building commander decks. So the story behind this goes, there is a professional Magic player, like plays for money, not just makes YouTube videos and therefore makes money off those, but like his performance at events directly relates to his paycheck. And he did the math a few years ago on how many lands to run in a limited deck. And limited decks are 40 card decks that you build off of whatever booster packs you find at an event. So you get 6 booster packs, you build a 40 card deck with it. There's your limited deck. It's got to be based only on the stuff you find from the pack. It's a fun format. It's expensive to do for long periods of time because, of course, you're buying all your stuff. But the rule of 17 lands was something he concocted back then, based on the math of how many times do you have to mulligan to see a 3 or 4 land hand so that you can actually play in this competitive event where money's involved. Yeah. And 17 out of your 40 cards in your deck being lands was the number he came up with. And that number directly correlated to the number we had for 60 card competitive events where you bring a pre-constructed deck, because in those events you run 24 lands. But in Commander, the common knowledge is to run anywhere between 35 and 37 lands. But the math doesn't add up there, because it should be 42.25% of your deck being lands if it lands up with what the competitive results are for the other formats. Yeah. And it turns out everybody, including me, had been building decks incorrectly. A large YouTuber who's actually used to be part of the Commander, not rules committee, but the Wizards of the Coast committee that helped oversee Commander that was next to the rules committee, and she showed the math on Commander decks and showed that we should be running about 43 decks or 43 lands in our decks instead of the 37-ish that everybody's been running. And I had like a week of just talking with Saki about how much I disagreed with that, and every bit of it was wrong. And every single time I said I disagreed with it, the follow-up was, but I don't have a good reason to, because I can't argue with numbers. I can't argue with the numbers that are right there showing me how wrong I am. I just don't feel like those numbers are right.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that was addressed in Rebel Lily's video as well. Or not Rebel Lily, in Rebel's video as well. She immediately went, yeah. And the first thing that you're going to say is, that doesn't feel right. And that leads to our first problem. Everybody's way of building land bases is almost all vibes. And I'm like, no, it's not. Wait, hold on a minute. Yes, it is. That's how I've been doing things all the time. So like when I play my decks, I always feel like I have to kind of aggressively mulligan to get the right opening hand. And now I know why. The reason is I was building with an incorrect number of things. And I'm mad at myself because I've been doing this for years. And then somebody comes along and just shows me all the numbers that says, now you've been doing this wrong, and you also don't have a good argument against this.
Yeah. Now just going back in the chat a little bit, I think some people might have misunderstood what I said about the junk DNA thing. So the follow-up study was not that 85% of our DNA does have function. It was that it's possible. Like the number, like given what we know of DNA from other studies and other calculations and stuff, we know that like the actual functional portion of our genome is rather small. It's hard to put an exact number on it, but they're just like, it's not a problem for reproduction and getting rid of the harmful mutations if 85% or 85 to 90% of it or whatever is actually fully functional. Now, to be fair, or to then go to the other side, there's the ENCODE project that creationists love to cite, which came up and we were like, oh yeah, 80% of the genome is functional. And this is where we get into, it depends how you define function, because the way they defined function was, we found a nucleotide that does literally anything. And so this could be there's two different primary definitions of function in biology. One of them is ad hoc. This is a thing that it is useful for, but it is not necessarily the reason it evolved. And then the other is the reason it evolved. So like the heart evolved to pump blood, but one of the things that it does, that is a function that the heart serves, that is the ad hoc function, is it's a useful diagnostic tool for doctors. It makes a thumping sound that can help doctors diagnose things.
Yeah, it didn't evolve to do that, but doctors use it as a shorthand.
So that's the ad hoc function where like, yeah, this is a thing that it can be used for, but that is not the purpose it evolved for. The purpose it evolved for was to pump blood. And so the ENCODE project used the ad hoc definition of function, and that's another one where like you can be more liberal or more conservative with that one. And if you get liberal enough, technically there's a thing that every single nucleotide in your genome does. It's be replicated. That is a thing that it does. Therefore, even if it has no other function, these nucleotides have the function of being replicated. So you could use that to say, yeah, it actually has 100% function, but that's not actually useful in this discussion.
That's like saying cancer is functional because it can replicate.
Yeah. Paige Wild says that's a pretty low bar. Yeah, that is a pretty low bar. That's why there were literally dozens of papers that came out after ENCODE project being like, hey, these guys are doing it wrong. And some of them were very, very, shall we say, terse in their responses. They did not give any quarter, so to speak.
Couple of things from my chat. Dude Leo in my chat says, was the 40 plus thing ignoring the amount of ramp you have. Yes, it was, and the reason that was given by Rebel makes perfect sense. During a turn where you play a land, you have gone up one land, and therefore things are good for you. During a turn where you have missed a land drop but played a ramp spell, you've gotten the same amount of land on your board as you would have by just playing a land, and also now you're down mana. You're just playing inefficiently there, but because you have your lands on board, you're like, it's not that bad. But no, just casting spells does not mean you're doing well. So that was for that one. The other one in my chat was Endlessly Big saying, are you saying 37 lands straight or 37 lands plus MDFCs? So it was 37 lands in general, with kind of a soft thing for MDFCs where they count as half a land because half the time you're playing them as a land, half the time you're playing them as a spell. But for Rebel, she's just counting MDFCs as a full land, and with them being even more important to avoid mana flooding later in a game. That's where that breakdown is. So there's even a different way that the lands are being measured by her than how I was measuring lands.
Yeah, okay. Nomphus is asking, didn't Encode later decide that their previous definition of function was bad and revise the number down? I didn't see that, and there's probably a good reason I didn't see that. If that did happen, the reason I didn't see that is because I only see the Encode project come up in response to creationists, and when looking for counters to the Encode project's findings,
I never hear dinosaur enthusiasts talk about the dinosaur DNA found in bone marrow, but I always hear creationists talk about that.
No, there was no dinosaur DNA found in bone marrow. But yes,
exactly.
I hear creationists talk about that too.
That's my point, Rhino.
I know those ones are so fun though, because when you actually look into it, it's like, oh, they found they found structures that were morphologically similar to proteins. And if they some of them have a high enough resolution that they can like work out what the what's it called? The 3-letter sequence of amino acids turns into it's the base pairs. I don't know. Whatever. I get the terminology wrong. This is why I script my videos, because I Google everything. Even stuff that I've said a million times before. But they can reconstruct the they can kind of backwards reconstruct what the DNA would have been from what amino acids make up the proteins. It's not perfect because there are multiple sequences of nucleobases that can result in the same amino acid. So you can't figure it out exactly, but it's still pretty fucking cool. And it's nothing like what creationists presented as.
I mean, science is always way more interesting than how creationists present it.
Mm-hmm.
And more complicated.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, Friday's video. I'm responding to Answers in Genesis Canada again. It's Calvin again, and it's fun.
Yeah.
It's a fun one. And then goddamn fucking Force Valkai releases a video today responding to the same fucking guy. It's a different video, but it's also a video that I've responded to. I'm just like,
and now you're just
stepping on my
sad.
toes. Well, no, I'm happy because Force is good. And he actually he found the context for a quote that I couldn't find the source for. Like, I found the paper, but the paper wasn't available online. So he must have used some of his more scholarly connections or something to find the actual paper, because I could not for the life of me find a copy of that thing, and he just pulled it up like it was nothing.
Huh.
I was like, okay.
He's just better
I'm glad
at his
you
job.
added to the conversation and did so better than me. That is the one where I went crazy and like stabbed an imaginary person behind the camera and then was covered in blood for the rest of the video.
I mean, I too have stabbed a person behind the camera and was covered in blood the entire time afterwards, but I hide behind an avatar, so none of y'all saw that.
I also poured soy milk all over my face for that one, and all over my microphone.
Is your mic okay?
You can tell from the audio, like I use the one that I didn't soy milk all over when I'm recording now. But you can tell from the audio, which you guys will never hear because I'm not going to use that mic anymore. Like Like it still works, but you can tell that something is not quite right with it. Like it sounds a little bit muffled.
Like a little bit of tin.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah, Fennec says it was chocolate soy milk. That's because I am committed to the bit. It is actually kind of hard where I am to find soy milk. I went to 3 grocery stores for that soy milk, and
Jassa
none of
says
them had it.
Jassa says that I didn't say imaginary. I know what I said.
Yeah. Yeah, so none of the grocery stores had soy milk. And yeah, I could have gotten almond milk or something, just something that looks like soy milk for the camera. And I could have done that. But I'm like, no, it has to be actual soy milk. And the last grocery store I went to, they had chocolate soy milk. They did not have white soy milk. So I'm like, fine, I'll get the chocolate soy milk, whatever. And then my stupid, like, I regret doing it because it doesn't, like, it makes the video kind of seem awkward or whatever. Like, after I pour the soy milk all over myself, I, like, look at the camera and I'm like, that's soy milk for you, Ryan. I'm like, oh, that's cringe. Why did I say it like that? But what was going through my head at the time was like, oh, I'm pouring chocolate soy milk all over myself, but it's chocolate. What if people don't know that soy milk can also be chocolate? And they think I'm just, like, drinking chocolate milk. So I better clarify that this is soy milk. And it just happened and it came out. And that's the kind of thing that, like, it would be a whole thing to set up a second take of that. So I wasn't about to do a second take of that. So
you were already knee deep at that point.
As soon as I said it, I was like, oh, that was dumb. I shouldn't have done that. But then I'm like, whatever. It's in there now. So, yeah. Anyway, that's why it's fun to be wrong. You learn new things.
Yay.